Hey there, Icarus here, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. Like Indiana Jones, do you feel a little disappointed by his more recent octogenarian outing? Well, guess what? I got just the Doom mod right here to help you recall more adventurous times. Taking place across the three distinct episodes, from Meso-America to Egypt to mysterious sunken ancient cities, Venturous, in the footsteps of the fallen, will take you on quite the journey. Along the way, you'll be contending with nefarious Nazis seeking to loot the treasures of antiquity for their own gain, while also contending with the restless undead spirits of the civilization in question. Naturally, you're going to need a bit of firepower to defend yourself. Default is the Webley revolver, which comes with a machete, and more prominently, a torch. You'll actually find torches quite useful during the course of Venturous's many dimly lit tombs, as not only do they help light the way, but also double as an offensive weapon, which can be thrown at enemies, in some cases outright lighting them ablaze. Other weapons that you'll be able to take advantage of during this early part of Venturous include the likes of the Browning lever-action shotgun, which, when switched to, will be produced with that signature spin, which is always effortlessly cool. The MP40 provides for your more immediate rapid-fire needs, whereas a little further along, the MG42 will provide a more heavy-duty role. On the more explosive end at this stage, you'll also get your hands on the likes of the Panzerschreck, which, while undeniably effective, could probably do with a little bit more beefiness in the sound department. Sometimes it just kind of peters out further the projectile travels. As for the levels themselves, you'll find these to be quite detailed and expansive in terms of exploration. The first one on second pass actually took me about 15 minutes to get through. Along the way, the level will take multiple twists and turns, tight, claustrophobic tomb sections opening up into more expansive and often quite richly detailed rooms. You generally get a sense that all of this genuinely fits together, shortcuts often leading you back to previously visited areas, and even then, with minimal consultation of the auto map, you'll be able to generally make your way through without too much confusion. Encounters against the undead and Nazi alike escalate as you get deeper, providing a pleasing degree of challenge, even on Hurt Me Plenty, that rises to meet your ever-expanding armory. On that subject, the enemy roster here is actually quite nicely varied, ranging from the aforementioned Nazi troops, which include your common handgun-wielding variety, up to shotgunners, machine gunners, and of course, the brick shithouses that wield Panzerschrecks. On the undead side of things, you've got Aztec warriors, both of axe-throwing and just beat-you-around-the-face variety, priests that act as archviles, resurrecting the dead to continue causing trouble, and my particular favorite, these big old blue statues that occasionally come to life and lumber after you. They fire mancubus projectiles, and I just can't be mad at them. They just look so derpy. They're adorable. Rounding it out even more, you'll even find the likes of reanimated conquistadors lumbering around, or failed adventurers still wielding shotguns. It's just a nice touch, lending a little bit of history to the environment, the sense that many have come before and many have failed. After escaping the trap-laden trials of this opening level, Meso-America's second part leads you to the Valley of Ruins. This kicks off in a lush, open-air, mist-strewn environment, really impressive looking, and we'll see you fight through this tangle of ruins, whereupon you'll be able to get your first taste of dynamite. This actually proves to be quite useful, especially with dealing with crowds of enemies. More useful, in my opinion, in its alt usage, which detonates on impact as opposed to its primary, which feels like it's got quite a significant amount of time on the fuse before it actually blows. But regardless, after a bit of battling through the ruins, the blue skull key will lead you through to this section, whereupon you grab, in my opinion, one of the best uber weapons in the mod. Seriously, how can you argue with a paddle that allows you to smack mystical undead skulls back at your enemies, thereby obliterating them on death? You can't. It's awesome. The deeper reaches of this level see you humiliating yet more enemies with the paddle, because it's just too gosh darn fun to use. Fireball traps and spike crushes will occasionally be a source of peril as you fight your way ever further through the undead before reaching the heart of the tomb. I really love the way this looks. Doubly so the throne room that can be reached a little further off to the side. Just something pleasing about seeing a yellow skull key perched atop a skeleton. Kept waiting for statues to spring to life, but just never happened. More undead though. Wouldn't you know it, after looping back around to this lovely looking central section here, it's our friends, the Germans. Some good firefight to be enjoyed here as you blast your way back through the ruin. That yellow skull key granting access to the final and most hectic section of this level. But hey, at least by this point I've got a few more charges for my paddle, just to keep things interesting for my enemies. Couldn't tell you why exactly, but I really enjoy this rickety looking wooden bridge over a gorge. Maybe it's because it reminds me of Temple of Doom. And after exiting through a cave, you'll find yourself at a grand-looking sacrificial site where the Nazis have found themselves at a bit of an unfortunate end, albeit reanimated. Clearing out the bodies and investigating the top of the pyramid will see a soul sphere rise out of the ground. Picking that up will actually present you with this big old kahuna of a boss. It has a name, apparently very difficult to pronounce, and the amount of time I would spend actually getting it right would be longer than it takes for me to actually down the thing, because yeah, he's dead. He's done. He's gone. Oh well. Time to go shoot up a museum, I guess. What can I say other than this is a heck of a way to open the Egypt section. This is just an absolute blast of a map in both senses of the word, and essentially makes you feel like Indiana Jones if he were John Wick. If I had to put my finger on what exactly amps that feeling up, one would be the soundtrack, which, despite sounding a little incongruous for something set during, I guess, the 1930s, certainly helps amp up the action, and of the action itself, setting up a firefight in a museum lobby full of smashable glass cases is just an inspired touch. Funnily enough, this is quite possibly the shortest level of the entire bunch, and by far the most fun. It even manages to introduce a handful of new enemy types during the action too. You've got these arcane-flavored Gestapo officers, as well as an Anubis statue springing to life. Ultimately, however, you'll acquire the requisite keys to gain access to alternate sections of the museum, notably including the artifact-strewn basement, before heading back up and finding your objective, that being the Professor. In this neat little pre-rendered cutscene image, the Professor tells you that the Nazis are seeking a key to Atlantis, and having not found it here, they've decided to go raid a nearby temple complex, which is where we head next. Sadly, it seems I had to leave all of my weaponry back at the museum. It's a good job then that these lamps are highly flammable. That said, it's not long before I bagged myself a Kar 98K bolt-action rifle, and boy is this intrepid adventurer rapid on those bolt-action reloads. Pretty damn punchy as far as rifles go, and it was about here that I noticed that I was actually doing additional damage by landing headshots, which I always find an impressive inclusion in Doom mods. As it happens, the site is not just crawling with German soldiers, but also the undead. But this time, mummy-flavored. Bandages. Similar regional variations go for the other enemy types, such as the sword-wielding undead, and instead of the axe-throwing enemies, we've here instead got archers. Layout-wise, the level here follows a lot of the same kind of beats as you'd expect from the tomb back in Meso-America sections, albeit much less infested with traps and much more interconnected with its shortcuts. Also worth mentioning that both in those preceding levels as well as this, there's various static torches that you can light, which act as handy little beacons should you get a little too lost. Granted, there's also the auto map, but personally, I feel it's all the better if a map can get away with having you navigate it without having to consult it. An alternate faction to the Nazis and the undead enters the fray partway through this level too, reminding me very much of the Medi from the Mummy films. And hey, wouldn't you know it? That's exactly what they are. By the way, you should absolutely watch The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser one. It's not a meme, it is legitimately a fantastically enjoyable adventure film. Back end of this level, we'll see you acquiring the Kopesh, which is the uber weapon for this particular part of Venturous, and it's fine. I mean, it's no paddle that you can use to hit skulls at your enemies for a ridiculous amount of damage, but I guess it'll do. As it happens, the Anubis statues here seem to be taking up the Revenant slot, so hope you enjoy homing projectiles, because they're very much back on the menu. Oh, and yeah, I picked up an SSG at some point during this map. Big boom, high damage numbers, very nice. After further pitched battles with the undead throughout this tomb, you'll eventually find yourself facing down Wouldn't you know it? A pharaoh.
Of course!
These essentially take up the archvile slot for this section of the mods, and you know what, I just like that it varies itself up depending on the region. It makes sense, but I can imagine it's a bit of a pain in the ass to implement. The map concludes with a pitched battle above ground against a combination of German forces and the undead after you loot the key that leads you to the back, which inevitably puts you in the next level, the dig. The dig certainly feels like a much more atmospheric map in comparison to those that have come before, and that could certainly be chalked up in large part to the choice of soundtrack, which is appropriately tense, but also to the time of day that the level is set at, that being during dusk. As a result, the opening section here is just drenched in this really nice looking, almost cobalt blue. I just find it a personally really pleasing aesthetic choice that works tremendously well. Regardless, after a fun pitched battle through an above ground ruin, you'll find yourself at the dig site proper, whereupon you'll be able to acquire this quite unusual looking MP40, unusual mainly due to the big fat honking scope attached to the top of it. This is the Vampire, a night vision scope, and yes, something that was actually a thing during the course of World War II, albeit more typically mounted on the likes of assault rifles and sniper rifles, but all the same provides a much clearer green-tinted view through the gloom. I wouldn't say that usage of the Vampire during this map is a necessity, the gloom never feeling that utterly impenetrable, but on the other hand, I kinda wish that the map would have played into it more. Once again, the interior of the tomb here does a good job of adhering to that formula of more tight, claustrophobic, spooky sections and wider, more impressive open rooms. I'll freely admit, at this stage, a lot of the tombs are starting to blur together in my head because I've seen a lot of Egypt in a lot of games, but even then I can still acknowledge the attention to detail and atmospherics, particularly with regards to lighting. In terms of the structure, it felt pretty straightforward. Acquire 2 skull keys from disparate ends of the tomb, whereupon you open a door and, hey, new type of enemy to dispatch. Ultimately, this leads to a central chamber with a model of a city and an enigmatic key, which seems to be the focus of the entire dig. Nonetheless, in typical adventurer fashion, the entire tomb begins to shake, requiring a hasty retreat back out the dig site entrance, and, unfortunately, straight into the butt of a rifle. Gosh darn it, those pesky Magi knocked me out, tied me up, and stole my mystical key. If only there was some sharp magical sword nearby that I could use to— Aha! Gotta admit, this one has a really fun opening. Battling your way through Magi forces, looting weapons as you go. There's also these fellas. They're a bit spry on their feet, but the fatal flaw seems to be that they only start dodging after they've taken a hit. In any case, the Magi soon regret leaving all of this heavy weaponry kicking around because I soon have access to dynamite, and I want to say it's a Lewis gun, but it doesn't look like it's got that girth in the barrel. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments what it is. This, however, is a Jezzail. Yes, it is a real weapon, but no, it doesn't natively fire mana like railgun rounds. That, I feel, would have reshaped the entire history of war. And, if anything, the biggest crime of this map is presenting me this glorious weapon, and then promptly just drying up mana-wise. 15 mana per shot. 15! Once you get below ground, the tomb here plays a lot of the greatest hits that are present in the majority of tombs throughout these maps, of which this more open area here plays host to a pleasingly challenging battle that was kicked off by this here enemy playing peekaboo behind the ledge. And, oh yeah, before I forget, this level exclusively swaps out your Webley revolver for a Mauser C96. It's genuinely a great upgrade from the Webley revolver, and guess what? It goes away once you finish this map. Why? Apparently it doesn't fit through the portal. Yeah, that portal. Same goes for the rest of your weapons, apparently. I'm beginning to think that this friendly Magi at the end of the level is telling some kind of fib. I mean, that said, I did kill most of his men. Anyway, say hello to Atlantis. The Germans are already here, apparently. They didn't need the portal after all, they had submarines. Go figure. But as with previous changes of location, new place means new enemy types. Even when it comes to the German troops. This time bringing along units that can throw stick grenades, which now replace the dynamite, should you pick some up for yourself. Gotta admit, I'm grateful for the change of scenery when it comes to the look of Atlantis. The sand and right angles of Egyptian tombs make way for lava and more angular architecture. The vampire makes a return, though I've got to admit, you're probably better off just sticking with the base MP40. I don't think I used the night vision scope a single time during the entirety of this map, so at this point, all it's doing is taking up screen space. As far as progression goes during the course of this map, it feels fairly breezy. Not to the degree that it's a cakewalk, far from it. There's still a fair few challenging encounters during the course of this map, but more in the sense that I didn't feel like any of these sections in particular dragged. In fact, they were quite well constructed, effortlessly looping you back and keeping you on track. In terms of the Atlantean enemy roster, you'll probably know what to expect by now. Locational swap-outs of familiar enemies from preceding levels, of which I'm quite a fan of the Automaton. It's like the older, cooler cousin of the derpy golem from the Meso-America levels. And in terms of the Atlantean variant of the Archvile, quite an interesting direction they went with this one. They went for a creepy guy in a diving suit. I'm not complaining. Probably my favorite type. In terms of least favorite, however, that'd have to be the shield-bearing enemy. They're just a pain in the backside. I don't want to be playing peekaboo. I want to be running and gunning. Additionally, there is also the High Priest. This one wields an energy staff that can shoot a bolt in your general direction, and the first instance of which actually guards the uber weapon for this particular area. That being the incandescent Renseur. It's a plasma gun. It's a plasma gun. It's a plasma gun with a spread fire. It's still not a paddle that lets me hit skulls at my enemies. I'm sorry, nothing's beaten that, and it never will. Have I mentioned the Abomination yet? There's an Abomination, and in terms of its delightful attributes, it likes to vomit mana at you. Charming. But yeah, overall this map flows reasonably well. It maintains this uneasy vibe for the entirety, thanks to, again, a really good choice of soundtrack, and manages to escalate well in terms of its combat encounters, pretty much all the way up until you actually have to go and fight a boss. Yeah, he looks a bit familiar, doesn't he? He's basically a scaled-up version of the same big kahuna I faced back in Meso-America. He seems to be about as equally lacking on the health department, and unfortunately can be cheesed by getting up to this particular side of the arena. Oh well, I guess we're just gonna have to move on to the next map and see what exciting challenges. Oh wait, it's finished. That was the last one. Oh damn it. Truth be told, I've quite enjoyed my time playing through Venturous, to the degree that I've actually done it twice in the pursuit of making this video. Largely because I forgot to actually record any usable footage the first time, but still, the fact that I was able to go through this twice and still find it pleasurable speaks volumes. You know what else speaks volumes? The fact that this is pretty much the author's first big project, save for maybe a handful of speed mapping entries. To have this as your debut, that's actually really goddamn impressive. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and hold this up as a paragon of perfection or anything. There are flaws. Those bosses could stand to be a heck of a lot more challenging and varied. I feel like there could be more effective usage of some weapons. Yes, I am talking about the vampire in particular. And on a more nitpicky front, some of the audio could use some work. When I fire a Panzerschreck, I don't want the explosion to sound like a whisper. But outside of that stuff, I feel like the biggest criticism I can bring to bear against this is the fact that there isn't more of it. I'd love for there to be more of it. But yeah, what's here is pretty damn good. A tribute to the likes of Indiana Jones and The Mummy, good old-fashioned style adventure, and if you're in the mood for that, Venturous is assuredly well worth a spin. In that regard, the link, as usual, is in the description below, and I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments. Feel free to like, subscribe, all of that usual algorithmic nonsense. And if you fancy supporting me a little bit more directly, you can do much worse than join this esteemed list of patrons. From $1 due, you can help support what I do. But until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.